Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our virtual town hall series. Today's session is for faculty and GTRI. I am Renee Kapkowski, Vice President of Institute Communications. We're thrilled to have you with us today. We're doing this in a series of town halls so that we can try to answer as many questions as possible during this uncertain time. We are doing it through Microsoft Teams because it could accommodate the most attendees at one time. I will give you a technology warning that if you're coming in through the VPN, you should log out. You will get better audio and less delay in video if you are not logged in through the VPN. So go ahead and log out of your VPN and rejoin us without it. And please know that we will also record this and post it on the Georgia Tech COVID-19 site, and we will try to get to as many questions that were either pre-submitted or come in through our Q&A feature here on Microsoft Teams as possible. But if we aren't able to get to everything, we will be posting the FAQ to the Georgia Tech COVID-19 site as well, so you'll be able to find answers there after the fact. It will take about a day or so for us to be able to do that. It takes some time to process the video. So today we have President Angel Cabrera. We also have Dr. Rafael Bras, the Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs, and Dr. Shawi Abdullah, the Executive Vice President for Research. With that, I won't waste any more time and I'll turn it over to President Cabrera.
Thank you, Renee. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for taking some time for this session. And I hope it works well. I think you already submitted lots of questions, and you have a capacity, I think, within the platform to continue to enter some additional questions. But maybe just to open up the conversation, I wanted to start by thanking all of you for the incredible work over the last month. I mean, it is nothing short of remarkable what you've done to transform Georgia Tech virtually overnight, with only 2 weeks of warning, to somehow transition our entire instruction to a distance format has been just simply remarkable. And you know as well as I do, if anyone had asked us a few months ago whether Georgia Tech would be able to transition 100% of its instruction and most of its work to a remote format, I would have guessed that it would take us years of planning, and that's exactly what you've done. And I really appreciate the work, the dedication, the flexibility. I know many of you had unique circumstances at home, whether you're taking care of aging parents, whether you have young families to take care of, and kids who are also staying at home. I know it hasn't been easy, and I really appreciate it. Some of you had experience teaching online. For many of you, it was the first time, and somehow you jumped on it, and you were creative and innovative, and you did what had to be done, and for that I really thank you. And I know that I think this sort of massive real life experiment will have some positive consequences. I think that the fact that we're been forced to experiment with different ways of working, of conducting research, of doing the instruction. I think when we go back to our normal setting, many of the things that we're learning and that we've deployed will serve us very well. Of course, I send a word of sympathy to all of you who are dealing with the disease. I mean, this is and still is a very dangerous disease. I think that the latest data we have is that over 35,000 Americans have died. More than 600 people in Georgia have died, some of them close to our community, and they have touched even people who I work with closely every day. They've lost spouses and parents to the disease. So those of you who are dealing with it, I wish you all the best. We send you all the best wishes for a swift recovery. And let's keep doing. I know it's we've heard this many times, and some of you are experts in the field and remind others constantly. But let's keep reminding ourselves that we all have a part to play in dealing with this pandemic. That we need to do what we can right now given the intensity of the contagion, to isolate or to be at home, to keep a distance from others, and those of us who somehow need to come in contact with others to make sure that we're very protected. So thank you so much for all of that. Of course, during the first few weeks, we had to focus, and that has been and will continue to be our top priority, which is the safety and health of our community. The biggest priority in the first few weeks was to really reduce the number of people on our campus to the absolute minimum. That's why we encourage everybody who could to take their work home and to work remotely. And that's why we also requested that all students, except for those who really did not have an option, they all moved away from campus. This was fairly very stressful, as you can imagine. Again, without notice, people having to pack up, people from out of state, from other countries, was even the logistics much more complicated. But we were able to reduce the numbers from a little under 9,000 students who normally live on campus to just barely 600, which is the absolute minimum number that couldn't go anywhere else. And even those have been distributed to some of the apartments to minimize the chances for them connecting with one another. The campus is not closed. A lot of our colleagues and the staff are still on campus to try to first take care of those 600 students who are still there, but also the health services, the police facilities, some of the minimum services to keep some of the essential services on campus going. And so there's still people going to work on campus every day. And I thank all of you again for having done your part in moving out of campus. So it's not just for your own health, but for the health of those who need to continue to go to work. That focus on safety will continue as our task force that initially focused mostly on how to deal with this transition. Now it's pivoting to thinking about the future, and not just the institute-wide task force, but the provost now has a group thinking about how do we eventually return to residential instruction. Shall we and GTRI and others, they also have a group thinking about how to transition some of the research back. Of course, a lot of research continues to be done, especially research that relies on computing and that can be done remotely. But a lot of the lab-intensive research, of course, has stopped, except for with some very small exceptions. And so we have a whole number of people now looking into what does it look like when we return. On the should be right. I just say the top priority is to make sure that our community is safe. The second priority is our students, is to make sure that the learning keeps going, that academic progression doesn't suffer, that our students continue to make a good progression towards their degree. Again, you have been a huge part of making sure that is the case. As you know, there have been lots of requests by many of our students. Some of you also have argued in favor of transitioning our grading to a pass-fail situation, and I know actually the voices of the students continue to be heard, and they're quite strong in that regard. I just want to let you know that that's an issue that where the system, the university system, has decided to make a system-wide decision for a number of reasons. From their standpoint. First, there's some of our sister institutions that would have a very difficult time implementing that if it was authorized, but also there are complications with the Hope Scholarship, which, as you know, really finances the tuition for many of our students, most of our in-state students actually, and it requires certain GPAs. There are complications there that led to the system to decide that they would make a system-wide policy. So while I sympathize and honestly, I totally understand many of the arguments by some of our students, especially the fact that many of our students, when they go home, they're facing different circumstances. They're not all playing the same playing field, and some of them may not have anything from sufficient bandwidth or a reliable internet connection. They may not have a physical space where they can concentrate and study, or they may be dealing with different and unique family circumstances. I think that puts some students at a disadvantage. We don't have, as I said, the option of going pass fail given this system-wide policy. And what that does is sort of it puts the responsibility on us, on each of you, to making sure that we are sensitive to those differences, sensitive to those circumstances that our students are facing. I know you've had many conversations with the provost, with deans, with the department chairs, and I just want to add my word and my encouragement that we really be as flexible as possible, as accommodating as possible, and that not only we just wait to hear from students who may have trouble. Some of our students may not be reaching out or may not feel comfortable enough to let you know that they're facing real issues, but it's up to us to try to be alert as much as we can to see what students may be falling through the tracks, and I encourage you to do. I know you already are, but to really do what you can to identify students who may have unique trouble following the classes online, and that you try to be as accommodating as possible. On the academic side, as you know, we had to make the sad but necessary decision to cancel commencement in May. It was it is a hard decision to make. I mean, this is such a special day that all students look forward to, that the families look forward to. As you know, I was blessed to be there in McCamish last year as a parent, celebrating my own son's graduation from Georgia Tech, and I totally understand how special that is, but there was absolutely no option. Here's what we're going to do in case our students ask. I mean, we are planning a virtual celebration the day of where we should have had commencement. There will be a virtual. Our communications group is thinking very creatively of what ways we may be able to leverage some of these virtual tools to do something that is fun, that is celebratory, that students may be able to share on social media and the like. But also we're planning to have a real commencement where the students who miss theirs can come back to. Ideally, if things evolve reasonably well this summer, we could do it at the end of the summer term, which is end of July, beginning of August. That would be a perfect time to do it, where some of our students who graduated in the spring could choose to come back. If that were not possible, the second possibility would be to invite those students to come and join us in the December graduation. Again, we're not posting a firm date yet because there are so many unknowns, but that's sort of our current plan. Just on the sort of the research side, and Shawi will brief us later. I want to use the opportunity to thank the many colleagues in the faculty who very quickly started to think about how their own expertise could help us not just at Georgia Tech, but in the broader community and even globally deal with the COVID pandemic. And I've been just so inspired by what I have seen. Anything from engineering faculty jumping in very quickly, understanding that there was that personal protective equipment that was in very short supply, and designing creative new solutions, and not just testing them and getting feedback from users in local hospitals, partnering with manufacturers in Georgia, and really scaling up production of face shields from a few thousand a week to, I think now we're making a few 100,000 a week to supply Georgia and the needs in other states. We have faculty members who've been really helping doing modeling of different scenarios to try to understand the speed of the infection, and trying to help us be prepared for what's coming ahead, and doing that. We have faculty members, again, both on the academic side, but also at GTRI, working with the CDC and in data analytics and information technology that can help us fight the pandemic. On the testing side, very almost immediately, many of our faculty use PCR machines, and they've put that they've offered that to some of the certified labs, in the state to try to ramp up the testing capacity. You may have seen also, you may be aware that we partner with CVS. So there was no accident. The chairman of CVS is an alum, is a Georgia Tech alum, and now we have in one of our parking decks there is a drive-through fast testing site where almost 1,000 people every day are being tested, and within minutes, without getting out of your car, you're getting a result. Again, that's a partnership that thanks to an alum, but also thanks to our police department, our people on the ground who manage the logistics, and it's making a big difference. So again, I'm just delighted and grateful to see how our faculty are contributing to inform and better decisions elsewhere. Looking forward, this is what we're trying to do right now is to try to figure out how we can start going back, whether to normal or to a quasi normal operation, which is very likely that it's not going to be a sort of a flip the switch and now we're back to where we were 3 months ago. It's going to require a lot of careful planning. And we need to realize that we know what we know. We need to be humble with the information that we have, being very smart at reading the projections that we get from experts and national and international organizations. And at this point, the best thing we can do is just at least draw different plausible scenarios and start planning around those scenarios. And then waiting until we have sufficient information to decide what steps to take. One of the things we know is that there will not be residential instruction during the summer, that we've already moved all instruction during the summer online. That was definitely the safest thing to do, but it also allows us to now perhaps use the summer to start testing some new protocols. And as we start thinking whether different operations or different research activities or business activities can start going back to campus with the students sort of on and operating online, I think it gives us a little bit an easier setting to start testing these protocols. As I said, these different groups on the business side, the research side, the academic side, and then the overall coordination from the institute-wide task force, they're thinking about all the dimensions of what this return to work might look like. Anything from cleaning and disinfecting protocols to scheduling. I mean, how can we maybe start going back to some of our labs, but scheduling people so that we avoid high concentrations at the same time. Even behavioral changes. I think we all going to have to learn to operate in a different way, the way we relate to one another, the way we protect ourselves, and the use of masks and other changes that are very likely going to be necessary. We're also planning for the financial and economic impact of this. I mean, I won't sugarcoat it. This is going to be hard. We've already identified, as you know, when we asked the students to move out of campus, we decided, and it was the right thing to do, to refund, on a pro rata basis, the room and board and other fees of the services they weren't going to use. That the impact of that was a little over 20 million. When you add up other shortages or missed revenues, whether it's study abroad, Georgia Tech Lorraine, executive and professional education, athletic events, and the like, we've already identified a little over $50 million of pretty certain hit on our revenues in very immediately between now and in June. But when you start adding, with the information that we have, which is of course limited, but you start building in the possible or probable impact in the next few months, it can be twice or three times as much as that. We're awaiting instructions from the state. The state clearly is going to have a pretty big hit in tax revenues, and that's going to impact their ability to invest in our public universities. So that's going to make the hit also bigger. So a big part of what we're trying to do is to prepare to see how we can buffer that pretty sudden hit on our revenues, and that's going to require everybody's work. I know everybody's wondering, is this going to affect jobs? Is this going to affect salaries? Our top priority must be to make sure that that we can avoid any losses of jobs. Obviously, this would be not a great time for anybody to lose the job, given how bad the overall job market is going to be. So our number one priority is going to be to protect employment as absolutely hard as we can, which means that we need everybody's collaboration in reducing expenses from everywhere that we can. We're going to be working very closely across the Institute to making sure that every dollar that we spend is a dollar that needs to be spent and that cannot wait, because again, we need to do what we can to making sure that we don't have to impact employment at Georgia Tech. There has been some good news. You may have seen in the CARES Act that was signed into law a couple of weeks ago in Congress. It had a portion of the stimulus money dedicated to higher education. It's been distributed to institutions based on a formula that pretty much relies on a number of Pell Grant recipients by institutions. And in the case of Georgia Tech, it's a little bit over $10 million. Half of that amount is going to be provided very quickly, maybe in the next week or two. But even that amount is earmarked to support students in financial need. So we're basically just a distribution mechanism. None of that money can be used to buffer the institute's own financial expenses or losses of revenue. And this is just entirely, at least the first half of those $10.5 million go directly to students. Very quickly, when this whole thing started, and thanks to the foundation, the Parents Association, the Alumni Association, we were able to put together a student emergency fund for students who all of a sudden were facing, who were already, many of them, but even students who were not facing financial need, which now in the new scenario they were able to apply to student services for a grant of up to $1,000, and we've distributed now over $500,000 in those grants. With the $5.5 million, a little less than $5.5 million from the federal government, it would allow us to distribute even more money to our students. So that's that would be, I think, very, very much welcome and much needed. We're still working with our trade associations, whether it's AAU, APLU, and others, in our own team in Washington, to try to see if we can advocate to have a bigger stimulus directed to higher education. Right now, I think CARES Act has another amount of money that goes to the states to support anything from K to 12 technical colleges and in colleges and universities, but in the case of Georgia, I think that might be around $130 million, which when you distribute it across all those levels of education is not going to be a big, every penny counts. So we're going to be advocating to see if we can get more pennies to those sources. So hopefully that there'll be some areas where we can help buffer the impact on our financials. But I just want to make sure that everybody understands that it will be a hard year, and that we all need to be prepared to deal with that. Again, I'll just close this first part and open it up for questions. Renee will be moderating, but I'll close this section where I started, which is by thanking all of you for what you've done. It's absolutely remarkable. I've been inspired every day by the stories that I hear, the conversations that I have with many of you, the collaboration that I have seen happen across the Institute, the innovativeness, the ingenuity, the commitment to our students, the flexibility, the compassion that I see every day. and I continue to be incredibly confident and excited about the future. So anyway, happy to talk about anything you may have in mind. Renee, back to you.
Thank you, President Cabrera. So as I said, we had some questions pre-submitted and we've had some come in through the live Q&A. The most popular in both is what you just spoke about, the financial impact. A combination of a few of those questions for you is, while we understand that a lot isn't known yet, and that we do know that it will be a tough financial year, can you give some detail on what you expect to happen with salaries for faculty? And then a related question on the live Q&A is, because healthcare costs have increased at nearly the rate of pay increases in past years, and probably the expectation of at least salary freezes, will the cost from healthcare from the USG also be frozen or at least assessed?
So the short answer is we don't know. We don't have the answers yet. But I think the assumption of potentially no increase in salary, I think that's a good one, even though it hasn't been. I think the budget decision process hasn't concluded yet, and I don't know about the impact on the healthcare. But I'll take a good note and make sure that we keep an eye on that and see. One of the things that the system has done, which is of course some of the decisions that have already been made, as recently as this week, the Board of Regents voted on tuition, and they did what I think was the right thing to do, which was to freeze tuition across the board for all universities, in-state, out-of-state, professional, graduate, undergraduate. All tuition has been frozen. It is the right thing to do given the financial uncertainties that students and families are facing. But of course, given the fact that our expenses are not frozen and that they continue to rise. In fact, expenses in higher education have outpaced overall inflation for decades. By freezing tuition, of course, that creates additional pressure in our budget, but it is what it is. So I again, even though no decision has been made, I think an expectation of no salary increases is a fair one. And in terms of the healthcare expenses, I will make sure to monitor that and see what can be done.
Okay, and as a follow-up on the financial impact before we move into summer, another question about if industry sponsors ask for work stoppage and suspension of payment or cancel the projects because they can no longer afford to fund research while there are COVID-19 induced financial troubles. What might we do about student support? Is there any plan to charge reduced tuition, which I think you've just addressed, or fees for graduate students for the time they are not on campus during COVID-19?
Let me maybe address the fees part, and then I'll ask Shawi to maybe give us a little bit of an overview of the impact of potential industry sponsorship. But the decision that the Board of Regents made this week was to not only freeze tuition, but for the summer and for next year, but also to limit, for example, during the summer, the fees that can be assessed to students are limited to the technology fee and the special institutional fee. And so all the other fees related to normal services, which are not going to be, of course, offered to the students, those have been eliminated. And that, again, creates additional pressure on our budget. Those are the right things to do, but that need to be handled then from a budget standpoint. I mean, if we have debt on buildings that relied on those fees, that's really hit to our bottom line. And loans and debt and servicing, whether or not the students pay for transportation, we still have to pay for the trucks and the buses and all of that. So we're trying to be as sensitive as we can to the financial impact that the pandemic is going to have on families, but at the same time, all that comes at an expense for the institute, inevitably. But shall we? You might want to address sort of the possible impact of sponsorships, both from the federal level and from industry.
Yeah, thank you, Angel. So the question about the funding from industry, we are seeing some industry canceling or putting a work stoppage on their contracts. So we're looking at those to see where we're going to get the next funding from. So we have different revenue sources. We're trying to see, or we're working with our national organizations to get more money to support basically the overhead for the work that we're doing right now. We're also soliciting funds, as you probably know, from donations from entities that are able to provide us with maybe some gifts and so on. And the last piece of it is that some industries are actually coming to us right now, and they are providing us with funding or requesting that we work on other things that previously they were not funding. And so far we've been a little bit cautious because we did not consider those essential activities, but we're going to pursue some of that. So as far as postdocs and graduate students, this is at the highest level right now being discussed for the next phase of the stimulus and the budget and the congressional allocations. We should be hearing something in early to mid-May on that, and some of that is supposed to be helping us in dealing with the specific issue, which is the funding that has been stopped or is being stopped from industry.
Thank you, Dr. Abdallah. So looking a little bit into summer, I'll start with you, President Cabrera, with a combination question from some that were pre-submitted as well as some we're seeing online. Knowing that we are distance learning for summer, that's been decided, what does that mean for returning to working on campus? Will campus remain completely closed? And I'll leave it at that, and then we'll have a follow-up for Dr. Bras on instruction as a whole.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, the current plan is we're already committed to keeping all instruction online for the summer semester. Our current plan is, and that's what we're targeting currently, which is a restart of residential instruction for the fall semester. And I say that's our current plan. That's what we're targeting for. But of course, everything is up for change if all of a sudden the information that we get and around the evolution of the pandemic and the risks that it creates, if that changes, that of course can have an impact on our ability to return to normal. But right now, that's what we're aiming for. And as I mentioned earlier, this summer, I think even though we have decided that instruction will be online, but we do have an opportunity, and as these groups, these task forces on the research, the academic side, the business side, we may decide that certain areas can return to campus very likely under different conditions, different rules, different protocols.
Thank you. Dr. Bras, we have a question about, the question is, I feel like we're getting the signal to increase seats in summer instruction, but we are not experts at remote delivery. Is this in the best interest of student learning and faculty time?
Well, good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to talk to you. First of all, let me begin by thanking everybody. I'm talking about faculty, staff, and students for really an extraordinary effort in extraordinary times. As we talk of all these questions and as I browse through them, it is important to remember that we're facing a crisis of public health, and that is an issue of caring of the community. Frankly, it is not about any one of us, it's about the whole of us. And it is a burden that we all have to bear, and we will do the very best, and I'm very confident that we will do, in fact, an extraordinary job, and a lot of it is already evident from the work you already have done. Let me address the summer delivery of education. In fact, our students are showing increased demand to offer summer alternatives. And when you think of it, it is pretty clear that there are many that are worried about progress, making sure that they can complete their work on time. There are many that in fact have graduate students that for a variety of reasons have time on their hand, and they are interested in then using the opportunity to advance in their classroom needs. So we're seeing that demand. I believe that in fact we have done extraordinarily well in delivering, for the most part, this education at a distance or remotely. And I think we can do better. One of the things that are planned for this summer is a series of workshops or an educational boot camp, if I can put it that way, for faculty to come before the summer begins to fine-tune our tools, fine-tune our skills on how to deliver in education, and we're more than happy to help. In fact, even in the mad rush to develop this remote delivery, about 700 faculty lecturers asked and got help in preparing over the spring term. So I am confident that it will be. I'm confident it will be hard. I'm confident it's going to be a burden to us and to the students, but I am also very confident we can do it very well.
Thank you. While I have you, a follow-up to your question that came in ahead of the town hall. It's someone who's teaching a resident grad course this summer, and there's also an online version of that same course. Are those types of courses going to be merged into one section to facilitate administrative duties, or will they remain separate?
That's a very good question, and I had glanced through it already when it was asked. And the answer, it depends on the detail. Overall principle, I must say, naturally, I would prefer if in fact we are one efficient, and if it exists as an online course, I know that it's very high quality. So I would certainly prefer to do that. And I would ask you that you communicate with Georgia Tech Professional Education, Nelson Baker's office, or Nisha Boschway, to try to determine the feasibility of doing. The only thing in here, and I think can be worked out, is that some of the online courses, depending on what is the nature of the online course, and I do not know what you're talking about in detail, involves other parties. And we would have to clarify those arrangements with other parties. But I'm confident that we can go a long way in most cases.
Excellent. And one more while I still have you is regarding pass-fail and the decision there. I know President Cabrera addressed it. We have had a couple other questions about it, so I thought you might want to address where we are in the pass-fail discussion as well.
Well, the university system of Georgia has the task of managing all 26 institutions, and indeed we understand, and everybody understands that we are all different. Nevertheless, they felt that in fact in this particular case the issues that arose relative to for example the Hope scholarships and that depend on term averages to be given and continued, as well as other issues that were maybe more varied across the whole set of institutions. They decided that there would be no pass-fail in any of one of the institutions. We are a member of the system. We are a member of the university system of Georgia and belong to the state, and hence we will abide by that decision. Having said that, we are doing everything possible and have put up a significant effort to try to make sure that we are as responsive as possible to all students that find themselves in unusual stress. And we've been doing reasonably well, and all our services to handle those situations are still ongoing. At the same time, I have appealed to the faculty many times, and I know that you're probably tired of hearing from me about that, but it is important not to confuse rigor with just unusually hard, difficult presentations at this point in time and assessments. We can achieve rigor, we can achieve quality with empathy, with understanding that we're in a different situation, with flexibility. And I think that's what I'm seeing for the most part, with very few exceptions. And we hear about those, but with very few exceptions, that's what we're seeing. So it takes all of us as a community to address this situation, which affects the whole community. And none of us are immune to the problems that it presents, the locality, the family situations, the difficulty of delivery, the difficulty of receiving the information. So I ask from the students understanding and patience, and I ask from the faculty flexibility, empathy, and we can do our work well and do it with rigor.
Thank you, Dr. Bras. Turning to a different topic, I had a pre-submitted question from a GTRI research faculty member. They're confused about what to do if they're sick or taking care of a sick family member. Is the recommendation that we use the charge code for Families First Coronavirus Response Act and then rely on our GTRI sick leave as backup, or vice versa? So I'll give that to you first, President Cabrera, and then we can move to Dr. Abdallah.
Yeah.
Can't hear you. Sorry.
Apologies about that. I've only done 1 million of these video conferences. Now I was saying that we will send more specific guidance, and we continue to update the information that we provide. But my sense is you should use the Families First Act mechanism, and then use our sick leave as the last resort. But we will make sure to provide accurate HR guidance about that.
Great, thank you so much. And then, Dr. Abdallah, there are a number of questions, and I know we've talked about this a little bit, but very specifically, being able to access labs safely and the plan behind that. So I know you've addressed it a little bit, but as questions continue to come in, maybe a few more specifics.
Yeah, so let me first also address the something about GTRI. What I wanted to say is that GTRI has been incredible, just like the rest of the campus, in terms of supporting the efforts both for the state and for the nation, frankly. So a lot of the research, a lot of the ideas and innovations coming from Georgia Tech have GTRI prints all over them. In fact, they're leading many of them, both for the state and across. So as someone who's always known the importance, the value, and the criticality of GTRI, they're showing the world right now why we need to have an organization that can respond in that fashion to national emergencies. So thank you for that. Regarding the going back to the labs, as you know, we started out with a research continuity plan and almost within a few days pivoted to research ramp down plan. We're now looking at research ramp up or reboot plan, if you will, as well as something for the institute and the academic enterprise. So I have a team chaired by Christopher Jones, who's looking at that specific area. In fact, most everyone around the U.S. higher education institutions, they're looking exactly at that. How do we go back? When do we go back? What are the criteria to get people back on, and so on? So while I can give you the the complete plan because it's being worked on. I'll tell you some of the principles. We need to make sure people are safe. So we're not going to start going back unless we have guarantees and processes to check people, their temperature, to provide them with PPEs and so on and so forth. The second thing is that we're not going to come back, just like the president said, in one day. One day we're not on campus, the next day all the labs are coming back. So we're going to come back in different in waves. We're going to schedule people. We're looking at potentially scheduling at different days, making sure that we have rotations so that we don't have a lot of folks coming together or coming in close proximity or large number of them and so on. And then the last thing is to be able to also detect something before it happens. So the worst thing we can do is come back too early or start the research enterprise again very quickly, and then a few days later something happens and we say, oh, we need to go back to the other side. So that's actually the big high level thinking. We're getting a lot more specifics and we're learning from other institutions that have been looking or ahead of us a little bit. The folks in California, for example, they got hit earlier. They're putting together some ideas that others are using. And last, I want to say something to this specific area is that by going into this mode, we learned a lot about the disease, but we learned also a lot about ourselves, how we conduct research. So some of the research is going to be done differently, and how we respond to some of the research or some of the requests for research are going to be different. Some of them are positive changes. Others are going to be a little bit more challenging. Some of the requirements are going to be challenging, but others, how we reacted or how we responded quickly to some of the needs, the critical needs of society right now are going to be with us. So we may be launching in collaboration and in conjunction with the federal government, new efforts in trying to be able to respond to the next large emergency.
Thank you, Dr. Ardella. Moving to questions around staffing and hiring. I'll start first with a question about postdocs. A lot of us are international as postdocs. If our jobs end, we may be stuck in the US with no salary and no means to travel home. Has there been any consideration for that group?
Yeah, I'll take that again because so our agencies, the AAU, the APLU, and others, we're actually lobbying and speaking to the federal government specifically about international students, postdocs, students on student visas, and so on and so forth. So we anticipate to be both a relief, guidance, and relief for those. So I think it is being talked about or discussed at the highest levels, and at Georgia Tech, as a member of many of these organizations, we're advocating, but so is everybody else for this group.
Thank you. And for Dr. Bross, 2 questions for you on this front. Our school has hired 4 new faculty for fall 2020. Are we going to respect those contracts, or would those hires be postponed for next year?
Yes, we have been operating on a series of principles. If an offer was made and that offer accepted all the way through the system and approved, which I gather is what you're talking about, those commitments will indeed be honored. We are not engaging in any new negotiations at the moment, at least for a period of about 21 days, just to see where the finances that you heard from the president land. This cannot be sugar-coated, to quote him. The reality is that many institutions around the nation, certainly all major institutions, have already taken significant actions to stop faculty hiring as well as other hiring. We are not at that point officially or completely yet, but we are certainly being incredibly cautious and strategic about any new investments until we know exactly where we will be.
Thank you. And then the next question for you, Dr. Bross, is will faculty going up for promotion and tenure in 2020 to 2021 be on the regular schedule for turning in their RPT packets?
Excellent question. There will be a communication coming out of possibly today about changes on the whole tenure process. And to summarize it, it has more detail than that, but it's basically an opt-out system. In other words, all faculty that are not tenured, I think from year 1 to year 5, but that will be outlined clearly, will have immediately extended 1 extra year on their tenure clock. That implies that's the year where they must come up for tenure is extended. It does not imply that you cannot come on your regular time schedule or any other time that in fact you and your supervisors agree on. And that option will be for every faculty. So all the faculty can simply accept that extension, or all on tenure faculty accept that extension, or opt out of it, and that's a decision that is up to you.
Thank you. President Cabrera, can you give us an update on the provost search and the dean of library search?
Yes, I'd be delighted to. And so some of the, and there are other searches as well going on, as you know, and obviously during March and early April, as we were dealing with this rapid response and transition, and some of these processes were put on pause, but they were not stopped. They were just paused, and all of them have been restarted already. So the deans of library, we are in the very final stages. The provost and I are gathering latest information, but I'm sure that we will be in a position to make an announcement very soon. The provost search, which was again paused, has now been restarted. There was a meeting last week with the committee and the search consultant. Apparently, there is it's a very rich pool of impressive talent and candidates. For not surprisingly for the job. So I think that work is gonna continue as other searches. We're looking at an internal auditor, CIO. I mean, there are other searches. As all of those will continue. There's another, by the way, line of very important work that was paused during the transition and that has now restarted, and probably top among them is the strategic planning process that, as you know, Dean Salavi and McLaughlin are leading. And we have now created working groups in each of the strategic themes. Each of those groups have now been assigned a chair and a vice chair. There's been a very inclusive process to invite members of the community to join in. They had a working meeting, and I'm told by Steve and Miriam that it was a very energizing meeting, that people are really now working hard on it. And I think it's is terrific that we, again, as much as we need to focus on today and in the next few months and what we do, that we don't lose track of the longer term, that we keep thinking about our long-term aspirations. Obviously, the current circumstances probably will somehow shape that thinking, but that we keep the trains need to keep going as we deal with today's crisis, but we need to keep the eye on the long term for sure.
Thank you. So as we move to wrap up, if you have any closing remarks, I think some of the remaining questions that continue to come in are just focused on the uncertainty of when we'll be coming back and the nature of our decision making along the way. So you may want to just retouch those points for this group as well.
Yeah, so I think it's probably better to assume that there's not going to be, as I think Shawi also referred to it, there's not going to be this one date that is like, okay, after that date we're back, but rather it's going to be a process, and it's going to be a process that is based on planning, on some experimentation, and that is going to be tied to certain gating data triggers, if you will. So depending on how the public health crisis evolves, we may be able to do certain different things. I think everybody's commitment at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level, at Georgia Tech, what we're hoping is that we can get back to work, and that even the processes that have been interrupted, that they can get up and running as soon as we can, even if to do that requires that we reconsider how we work. So returning back may not mean that we again return to how we conducted our business even just 4 or 5 months ago. It will be different, and that's going to require everybody's again, understanding, flexibility, ingenuity, all the things that have helped us get here. They're going to continue to be absolutely essential. So again, there's not going to be a specific date. It's going to be more of a process, and we're learning every day. We learn more. It is my hope also is that so this more drastic response of all of us, many of us, retreating home and isolating from each other, which is absolutely essential in this phase. As we learn more about the virus, hopefully as some of these antiviral treatments start proving safe and effective, as hopefully we make some progress in developing of a vaccine, and as we develop different behavioral patterns and the testing also spreads that, I think we may be in a position to return many of our activities back to normal. But again, there's not it's unlikely to be sort of a black and white decision. And maybe since we have the last minutes, Renee, I'll just close by once again thanking all of you for what you're doing. I mean, I know it's not easy. It's not easy on anyone. It's not easy on our students and their families. It's not easy on you or our staff, our colleagues. I mean, this has been just a absolutely extraordinary time for all of us. None of us had lived a situation like this, and yet every day I'm more and more inspired, more confident. I see people step up. I see people find new solutions to problems that none of us had dealt with, and I just want to express once again my appreciation, my gratitude for all you're doing, and also for being patient and for your commitment to the Institute and our students. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Cabrera. And I'll just give you a reminder that we will be posting answers to any questions we weren't able to get to through the FAQ on the Georgia Tech COVID-19 site. There are also unit town halls that will happen where you'll get some of those questions answered. And if some of them are very individual, we'll make sure they get the right hands if we're able to identify you on the question asked so that we can get you direct answers. We appreciate your time today. We appreciate your time, President Cabrera, Dr. Bras, and Dr. Abdullah. And look for the recording of this for anyone you might want to share it with on faculty who weren't able to attend in the next day or so on the website. Thanks again and have a wonderful day.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you.